welcome back to my channel. My name is Kelsey and I'm here today to do my August wrap-up. I understand that this wrap-up is a little late. I did go on a small vacation in the beginning of September and I don't really get to record during the week, so this is my attempt at 10 p.m. at night to record this video. I am in a new location. I am in my room, so I'm trying something new today. The angle is a bit off. I'm hoping you can forgive me for that, but here we are, so let's get into the statistics for the month. So for the month of August, I read 14 books, which was a total page count of 4,365, and that averaged out to about 141 pages per day, which is pretty great. I'm pretty proud of myself. In terms of star ratings, I had 1 5-star book, 6 4-star books, 5 3-star books, 2 2-star books, and 0 1-stars and 0 DNFs. And that came out to an average of 3.61, which is pretty excellent. But again, I only had 1 5-star book, so I'm hoping to kind of fix that because I was expecting August to have a lot of 5-star books and it didn't really compete with what I was expecting. In regards to the statistics surrounding the books, I read 10 female authors and 4 male authors. In terms of age, I read 10 adult books, 3 YA books, and 1 new adult book. And then just in regards to the format, I read 4 audiobooks, 6 ebooks, and 4 physical books. So let's get into the wrap-up, shall we? The first 3 books I read this month were part of my romance reading vlog, which I will link up above. In that video, you will see me read 3 romance novels, the first of which is The Foxhole Court. The second book is A Princess on Paper, and the third book is A Girl Gone Viral. So if you would like to see my thoughts and opinions on these books, I do encourage you to watch the vlog up above. The next book I read in the month of August was The Chosen and the Beautiful by Vo. This is a Great Gatsby retelling that follows Jordan Baker. Jordan has grew up among the most affluential members of society in the 1920s, and this includes Jay Gatsby. Much like the original, Jordan Baker has money and has invitations to the most exclusive parties in society. But in this reimagining, she is also queer, Asian, and is kind of treated like this exotic attraction amongst her peers. Before I begin my review, I do want to say that I never really freaked out about The Great Gatsby, and I never really understood the appeal in high school, but Vo quickly told me to fucking humble myself. Vo has the most beautiful writing that I have read this year, and I completely understand all the 5-star reviews that her novellas were getting. I was completely immersed in this story, and that was mainly because of her writing. But putting her writing aside, I think Vo completely changed the game for Gatsby retellings, and I would be really surprised to find one done as well as this one. It was an amazing reimagining that touched upon themes of racism, inequality, sexism, and of course had these touches of magic. I think the magical element of the book was really well done, and I didn't find it to be weird at all because the time period is already romanticized to us, so this element of magic just utilized this already established romanticism and just elevated it a bit. Vo did a great job blurring magic and reality. Not going into spoilers, but how it relates to Daisy and Gatsby's power within the original story was really well done. I do think that this novel would have benefited from additional pages because it does only come under 300, and because of this I found the ending to be abrupt, but I really enjoyed it anyways, and I ended up giving this a 4 stars. After that, I picked up A Torch Against the Night by Sabaa Tahir. This is the second book in the An Ember in the Ashes series. This series follows a young girl named Laya. When Laya's brother is arrested for treason, Laya risks her life to spy for some rebels as a slave in this castle in order to rescue her brother. And this castle is home to the Empire's greatest military. Within that military, Laya meets Elias, who is this kind of reformed soldier, but Elias just wants to kind of be free from this tyranny, and they both work together to set themselves free. Obviously, different things happen in this book, but I really enjoyed this. This is getting a 4 stars from me just from pure enjoyment. I think in terms of the plot and pacing, this would be more of a 3.5 star book, but I overall really enjoyed this, and I had a hell of a ride reading this book. Tahir really opened up the series for some new world building, and I'm interested to see how how this will add to the series, especially for Elias's character in particular. And I mentioned this in my review for the first book, but Tahir really knows how to create a fast-paced plot. I did not want to put this audiobook down. Part of this is because of Tahir's fast pacing, but also due to her engaging and really like fun writing style. I think the reason in particular I'm very interested in continuing this series is because I really enjoy the characters in this book. Laya and Elias are two messy people that have their own issues. And due to this book, I am so excited to see where Helene's plotline goes through, especially because I could see her developing as this evil character. And I love villains and I just can't wait because I really enjoyed her character. And if she becomes a villain, this is my prediction, I'm gonna love her even more. Marcus, although not the main character in this book, is an amazing villain as well. I really like where his plot points are going. I was a bit apprehensive to go into this book, to be honest, but I'm happy that I took the plunge and ended up reading it. I heard such mixed things about this, but I think it is due to the magical elements that are being added to the series, but I still enjoyed it. I do recommend it and I cannot wait to get the next installment. The next 3 books I read are part of a series of graphic novels, so I'll just review them one after another because I don't have a lot to say about them. But these are volumes 1, 2, and 3 of White Sand by Brandon Sanderson. So this is a part of my Brandon Sanderson project, and this is where I want to read everything that Brandon Sanderson has ever written, but I think this part I could have skipped a little bit. I was initially very excited to pick up this installment because the 2 characters that appear in this graphic novel series were also at the end of Shadows of Self, and that really fucked me up. I really wanted to see where their characters come from, how they relate to the Cosmere universe. Essentially, this series takes place on a planet called Taladin, and on this planet there are these legendary sand masters who are, as you guessed it, able to control sand. At the beginning of the book, this is not a spoiler, they are pretty much slaughtered because of this conspiracy revelation that is occurring within their society, and the weakest member of their society, named Kenton, is kind of thrusted into this leadership role. At the same time, Kenton meets a woman named Chris who comes from the dark side of the planet, and honestly she's a little bit of a badass, and their stories kind of interweave and they become a partnership that we see later on in the Mistborn series. So flat off the bat, I gave volume 1 a 2 stars. I was really disappointed by this, and I have a feeling that it is just because Brandon Sanderson's writing doesn't really transcend into the graphic novel format. I think also because it is a graphic novel, the story itself is kind of being chopped up into 3 portions, and it's not really written in this like one format, which I think Brandon Sanderson excels at. We've seen him write pretty successful standalone novels, and I just don't understand why the White Sand series wasn't a standalone novel like it was originally written. All I know is that I was pretty bored by the first volume and I really couldn't wait for it to end. I had already taken out the 3 volumes, so I knew that I was going to read them, but by the first volume I was having some pretty big apprehensions. The artwork was also not for me, and that really transcends into the later volumes. So moving into volume 2, I also gave this 2 stars. Again, it was another lackluster volume. Again, the dialogue felt really choppy to me. The plot picked up a little bit and I was like slightly intrigued, but the art just wasn't the best again. And this volume really, I was just shocked that this was from Brandon Sanderson, just because I expect such high things from him, as he is like one of my favorite fantasy authors. His stories are always really engaging to me and the plot points always really impress me, but these volumes just weren't doing anything for me. And that brings us to volume 3, which I did enjoy a bit more. I gave it a 3 stars. I do feel like this volume was miles ahead of the other ones. Could that be because I was just glad for it to be over? Perhaps. Alas, I think it was a pretty solid ending. I think Sanderson did do a good job tying things all up together, but I do again want to emphasize that I think this was meant to be one story. So obviously the ending is going to be more effective than the 2 previous volumes endings. He also left some plot points open for more future volumes, although I really hope not. In all, even though I think this was the most engaging volume, I just don't think the graphic novel is Brandon Sanderson's format. I need context. I need internal conflicts. I need additional details. And these are all things that a graphic novel just doesn't provide. And it's what I'm expecting from Brandy Sandy. That being said, and all of this to be said, despite my lack of enjoyment, I am still really happy that I read these volumes. I do think I learned about one of the worlds within the Cosmere, and I did get that background on Kenton and Chris that I was expecting to from reading these volumes. So I'm hoping that those two characters play more of a role in the rest of the Cosmere, but overall, I think you can kind of skip this series. Next, on a happier note, I did read The Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. Finally, I've put this on like I think 2 TBRs, and I'm really happy that I got to it. This is Robin Hobb's first book that kicks off the Realm of the Elderlings series. This starts off the first series called the Farseer Trilogy, and it follows a young boy named Fitz. Fitz is the bastard son to the king, and when his father finds out about him and abdicates the throne, Fitz is kind of thrust into this world where he really has no idea what he's doing. When he ends up at the castle of his grandfather, Fitz begins learning how to be essential to the throne and thus becoming the assassin's apprentice. Even though I really wanted to love this and expected to give it a 5 stars, I did also expect to give it the rating that I did, which is a 3.5 stars. I had just known and people had said that this is the weakest in the trilogy, which could be a bias in and of itself. Like I was expecting to give it a 3 stars. I have read from Hobb before, and if you watched my mid-year book freakout tag, you'll know that I was completely enamored by Robin Hobb's writing. And within this book, her writing is still an element that I absolutely adored. She definitely creates this atmosphere that pulls you into her world. And I certainly felt like Fitz running around Buckkeep and learning all these secrets that will help the king. I think this novel's downfall is really its pacing, which can be a good or bad thing. The slowness of the novel really makes readers learn about Fitz as a character and the reasons that he behaves the way he does and the choices he makes. However, this made the beginning of the novel a really slow start, and the novel only really picks up much later into the second half of the book. But again, this makes me really excited for the next installments of the trilogy because it can only go up from here. I trust Robin Hobb. Also, the Fool, what an angel. I cannot wait to see how he develops. Oh my god. After that, I finally picked up a book I've been looking forward to reading for a while. This is The City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty, and I read this for Mel Reads' book club over on her Patreon. This book follows a young woman named Nari who works as kind of this like con artist healer in the city of Cairo. One day, Nari accidentally summons this jinn named Dara, and in order to figure out what's going on, why Nari can summon this jinn, he takes her to the city of Devabad, and there Nari begins to learn some secrets about herself. So once again, this is a book where I think it's definitely telling that it is the beginning of a trilogy. I think it was a very interesting start to a series, but it is definitely very difficult to get into. The pacing in this book, I have to say, is horrible. The first half of the novel is incredibly slow, and I find you really don't learn anything about the world or about the characters or about the magic system because both the main characters did not want nor needed to really speak to one another. So it's really like 250 pages of like, I wouldn't even say angst, it's just like silent treatment. When the characters finally arrived to the city of Brass, it was still super confusing and I wasn't sure what was going on because there were paragraphs that were kind of like unexplained things. But I would say that the last 150 to 200 pages or so was jam-packed, and I ended up really enjoying those aspects. The characters started to learn things about one another. Prince Ali became one of the most interesting characters in the book, and Nari became a far more interesting character than she was at the beginning. Dara is still my angsty little bad boy, and I will be requesting more of him in the next book. I understand that this is Chakraborty's debut, so I'm expecting that the second book will be a lot better, and I ended up giving this a 3.5 as well. Next, I read an arc. It was called The Last Beautiful Girl by Nina Lauren, and I mainly picked this up because one, my friend Danny over at Current Chapters gave this a 5 stars and absolutely adored it. Second of all, this is a Picture of Dorian Gray retelling, and if you know me at all, that is my favorite classic book. I could read it every year. I love everything about it. All of the themes is just chef's kiss to me. And third, the author is from my city and graduated from the same university as me, so I feel like I gotta support her. But this is basically about a young girl named Izzy who was kind of dragged from her artsy school in New York and taken to a tiny town due to her parents' new job. The silver lining of this is that she moves into this kind of fancy old mansion that holds a lot of secrets, and when taking photos in this house for her Instagram, Izzy starts to realize that she is going viral due to the beauty and spooky nature of the photos. Right off the bat, I do want to say that this was a crazy experience. Firstly, as soon as this novel started mentioning the idea of beauty and society's expectations of youth, I knew I was getting some Picture of Dorian Gray shit, and I was instantly hooked. Isabella's portraits scattered around the house and changing in a ghostly manner.
Mentioned in the summary that they move into this like recluse model's home who was obsessed with herself, and her name is Isabella. So when I'm referring to the portraits on the wall, it's that Isabella's portraits. Like, she has them everywhere because she was obsessed with her beauty and her youth.
I was here for it because, as you know, the portrait changes in the Picture of Dorian Gray, and I absolutely loved that element. Much like the source material, I think the examination of relevant themes was extremely well done, and I'm surprised but happy at how well they worked as this like haunted house possession plotline. Even though I had an idea of how spooky this book could be, I really did not know where it was going, and I was really freaked out. My one complaint about the novel is that the book's ending is definitely the weakest point for me. There were characters who disappeared throughout the novel or didn't really have a role, and suddenly they were there at the end of the novel to help save the day. It felt really rushed and didn't feel satisfying to me, and definitely ruined the ending for me, in my opinion. But while the ending disappointed me, I think the way that the book scared me and the similarities to the original text were enough to make me really enjoy this read, and I ended up giving it a 4 stars. Second to last book read this month was my favorite read of the month, and this is Jade City by Fonda Lee. This book follows a fictional country called K-Con, where jade is coveted here. The jade market is kind of controlled by these two warring families who need to either work together or kill each other in order to control the country's substance of jade. So I'm gonna let you know I gave this 5 stars. This was such an amazing read. I don't really even have any notes on it. I have written down, I have no words for how good this was, no thoughts, head empty, and that's exactly how I feel. Fonda Lee is an excellent writer. She kept me completely engaged for 500 pages. I absolutely love the Call family in this, and I'm definitely in love with a pair of siblings. They were hot, they were angsty, and they were evil, and I'm absolutely here for it. I bought Jade War right away. I need to immediately pick it up. I literally do not have thoughts besides the fact that this book is perfect. I think if you're really into urban fantasy or fantasy in general, I would highly recommend picking up this series and at least giving it a go. I think everything that Fonda Lee attempts and does in this book is done correctly. The political tensions in this book are so well done. The themes that it talks about is done so well, and I just think this book is so good. And lastly, an equally amazing read. I did read Iron Widow by Ziran J. Zhao, and once again, I absolutely love this. So this book follows one of my favorite tropes, and that is the mecha element that is in a lot of animes. I love giant robots. So this book follows a woman named Zaytan who volunteers herself to be a concubine pilot for the Chrysalises. The Chrysalises are these giant robots that are controlled by young men, and the power that these young men kind of feed off is obviously young women. So when Zaytan's sister is essentially taken in as a concubine and thus destroyed once her energy is used up, she volunteers to become a concubine in order to kill this boy. Not a spoiler, she does successfully do so, and by doing that, she becomes labeled as the Iron Widow. I'm just gonna tell you that this was a wild ride and I fucking loved it. Wu Zaytan is the most terrible person that I have ever read from, and I love her. I love her. Every aspect of her actions is called for. She is a terrible human being and everybody around her deserves it. Zhao promised bloodshed and violence and she fucking delivered, baby. Zaytan is a young girl filled with anger at her society, at her family, and she is being called to a reckoning. Every attempt to destroy her literally made her stronger. And I loved the discussions that this book had on feminism. Like, yes, there were times where the overall themes were literally spelled out for readers, but I still really love them and the way that the main character processed her trauma and acts on it and how these themes interweave with that trauma. This main character really felt like a breath of fresh air. The world building was fantastic and not convoluted at all. This may be because I understand mecha and mecha robots and like what I should be imagining essentially from that imagery. But I think that Zhao did a great job describing the chrysalises and how they should be imagined or looked like. One problem I did have with the novel was how the action scenes were written. I think they were just a little too fast-paced for my liking and made it hard to follow along sometimes. But other than that, I think this book was absolutely perfect and I would highly, highly, highly recommend it. It's at the top of like my recommendations list. I pre-ordered this book. I absolutely adored it. I gave this book a 4.5 stars and it was definitely one of my favorites of the month and definitely one of my favorite books of the year. And that's it. These are all the books I read in the month of August. Like with my other videos, if you have read any of these books, please comment down below what you thought about them. Did you like them? Did you hate them? Do you disagree with me? I love to talk below in the comments. Also, if you would like to follow me on any of my social medias, I do leave a link down below to my Goodreads, Twitter, and Instagram if you would like to follow me on any of those. And also don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell. It does wonders for my channel and makes me feel really good. And that's all I have to say. I never know how to end these things, so I hope I will see you next time. Bye!